Audience building and community building are two very different things in podcasting, though we tend to use the terms interchangeably. And we also tend to ignore the latter. But true community building has its own rewards. Hello and welcome to another podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. What does community building mean to you as a podcaster? If your first thoughts turn to the properties you've created to leverage out and build a community for your show, we have a problem with language. Those properties that you've built are for people who listen to your show or consume your content. A better word for those people would be audience. And while I agree and support your desire to grow your audience, I'd also suggest you not neglect building an actual community in which you and your podcast live. Community building in this context means you and your podcast playing an active role in helping build out or support the community in which you belong, or communities in which you belong. See, we often focus on our community, but we don't podcast in a vacuum. No podcaster is an island. It takes a village, choose your aphorism here. And while, yes, getting more involved with our community of listeners might increase our audience, or even getting involved in a larger community might increase our audience, that's not the primary goal of community involvement. I mean, how much more business do you think that bar and grill on the corner does because they've sponsored your kid's Little League team? I mean, sure, they get some, but it's likely not going to cause anyone to be a dedicated patron just because they saw the logo of the restaurant on the kid's cap. No, the owner of that bar and grill, they sponsor your kid's Little League team because they're part of the community. And when the community thrives, they thrive. Not just professionally, but also personally, because they're part of that community. So I'm going to climb down now from my pulpit and give you 3 areas of community building to focus on as you start this process of building out your community. And again, not just a community for your podcast. Let's keep it local to start, as in your physical location. And yes, I realize your podcast may not necessarily speak specifically to the area in which you live. And you also likely have listeners from all around the globe. But not everyone in business in your local community directly serves your local community. The people within a 5-kilometer radius of you may not be your audience, but you still have to live with or at least around them. Getting involved in your local community shows that you and your podcast are active members of this community. So I'm not suggesting you set up a recording booth at your local farmer's market. That's probably not what you need to do. I am, however, suggesting that you play an active role with local community organizers, business mixers, and okay, sure, why not have your podcast sponsor a local Little League team for a couple $100 per season? It's not that big of an investment. And it shows that you value the people who live around you. And also, what a great conversation starter having your podcast logo on that Little League cap, huh? And then there's the overall podcasting community you could get more involved with. They, okay, let's use the term we, could probably use more of your support and more of your involvement, if that is, you have any more to give. And yeah, it costs a lot to travel to podcast conferences, which I'm cautiously optimistic we might be able to do in the near future. And while you definitely see the eager beavers at those conferences trying to drum up listeners to their show, they're kind of missing the point. The best advice I can tell you for attending these things is becoming part of the scene. That's hugely valuable. But you don't have to wait for conferences to get involved in the podcasting scene. You can get more involved with the various social properties where podcasters gather and other online groups. And again, not to rake in new listeners, but to support podcasting. You can work with people like the Bellow Collective or Curate for Earbuds Collective or Join the Podcast Academy. There are lots of ways to get involved. The podcast community is rich, vibrant, and pervasive. It's everywhere you probably want to be. So pick a corner and start making your mark. And finally, there may be a huge opportunity to get more involved in the communities in and around the trade or the industry in which you and your podcast belong. Just about every industry or interest group out there has one or several different governing bodies or other groups that are putting on mixers, creating publications, putting on trade shows. Seek those things out. See how you and your podcast can become more involved with those industry groups. Showing others in your trade or your industry that podcasting is also a part of that trade or industry can really introduce and create some interesting collaborations down the road. Or just elevate your status within the industry that you've chosen to be a part of. That in itself will give you more access, prestige, and yeah, sure, probably some more interested listeners. See, podcasters tend to know the importance of community building. Hopefully, this higher level view of how you and your podcast can get involved with the communities in your orbit might be helpful to you. With that, I shall be back tomorrow with yet another podcast, Pontifications. Cheers!